Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com, and we are here today with lesson number 6 in our incredible new tutorial series where you are going to learn artificial intelligence on the Jetson Nano. I will need you to pour yourself a most excellent mug of iced coffee. And I will need you to get your Jetson Nano out and get it booted up. And so let's switch over here and let's get ready to learn some neat stuff. Okay, I think we've got this ready to go. I need to get out of your way. And hey, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to all you guys who are supporting me over at Patreon. That's a huge encouragement to me, and it also allows me to continue to improve the gear that I have here to be producing better and better quality videos as we go along. So appreciate the help you guys are giving me. But enough of this nonsense about Patreon. Let's get in and let's look at the homework assignment which I left you with last week. Last week, we were trying to kind of get comfortable with Python, introduce you to Python. My assumption was that you already had done a little programming. Maybe you came to us from the Arduino world and were already familiar with concepts like if statements, while loops, for loops, and arrays. And we worked a little bit on those concepts, the syntax last week. And then I left you with the assignment that you were to go away and write a program on your own where you would ask the user for how many grades they had. You would then input those grades into an array. You would then print out the array of grades. You would average the array of grades. You would print the average, and then you would determine the high grade and the low grade, and you would give that to the user. Pretty simple program, but something that makes you kind of go in and get comfortable with Python. How many of you guys were successful with that? Were you able actually to write that program and get it to work? Okay, leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you were successful. But let's jump in and let's start coding this thing. Okay, so let's see exactly where we are. PWD. I was told that that stands for path to the working directory. I'm in my home directory. And then if I do an ls to see what is there, you can see that last week I created a folder that was, shouldn't say folder, these are directories. We've got to get rid of all that Windows nonsense. We are in a directory, and you can see I created a directory, MyPython. Let's go down into that so then we won't have to worry about path names after that. Make things a little easier. So how do I change directory? CD and then MyPython. That looks CD MyPython. That's going to work. Okay, ls, nothing there. So we're going to create a file. How do we create a file? We use our friend Nano, and then we are going to call this, I'm going to call it avgrades, and remember the .py. Actually, the .py is kind of important. You want to use good syntax, and you want to put that .py extension on your Python programs. And we do, boom, we got a fresh new text editor coming up. And so what are we going to do? We want to input grades into an array, so we've got to kind of create that array. Grade array, I will call it, is equal to open bracket, close bracket. Now normally you don't have to declare your variables in Python, but if you're going to be using an array, you got to kind of let it know that it's an array. So grade array is the name of the array. You could call it anything that you want, but call it something that sort of describes what you're doing. And then the open close bracket just says that it's empty. So I've got an empty grade array. Now I will need to get from the user input on how many grades he actually has. So how would I do that? What would be a good variable? How about num grades? Name your variables with something that means something. Make your code very readable. So how do I get input from the user? Well, I say input, okay. And then I'm going to use a single quote. How many grades do you have? And then question mark space. Close out that quote. Close out that parenthesis. Okay, now if I just did this, it would go out and it would get the number from the user, but it would input the number as a string, and we don't want a string, we want a number, so I need to make this an int. So as it comes in, I will pass it through int, open parenthesis, and then out here close parenthesis. So it'll read a string, it'll convert the string to int, and then it will put the int into num grades. I think that's exactly what I want. Okay, now we need to go out and get the grades from the user, and since we don't know if there's going to be 1 or 10, we need to have a for loop. Okay, so for, what will our index be? I is the traditional one, so for I in range. What is our range? We're going to start with 0. Why? Because we're programmers. Actually, I'm not a programmer, I'm an engineer. But if I were a programmer, I would count like programmers, and programmers start counting at 0. I don't know why. But that's what we do. We start at 0, and then we're going to go how many times to num grades? Okay. And then how do we want to increment that counter every time? By 1. Okay, we put a colon. The syntax for a for loop in Python is to use a colon, so we got that there. Now we got to think a little bit that how many grades do I have? Num grades. So if num grades is 3, I got 3 grades. Well, if I start counting at 0, I'm going to go 0, 1, 2. Okay. 0, 1, 2 is 3 grades. But remember that num grades, you don't go, that for the range function in Python, you don't go all the way to num grades, you go 1 before it. So in some crazy way, it all works out if you start counting at 0. Now if I started at 1, I would need to go to num grades plus 1, because it would stop at num grades, and then I would be 1 short, if that makes sense. So what we are going to do is we are going to go from 0 to num grades, and that will be the right number. If that doesn't make sense, pause it, rewind it, and go back and watch that again. Okay, but we are going to continue. What do we need to get? Well, on a for loop, how do we stay in the for loop? We indent. And if you just came and did not indent, you're immediately going to fall out of the for loop, and you're not going to be doing anything. So to stay inside the for loop, you have to tab over and indent. What I'm going to do is I'm now going to read the grade from the user. So I'm going to say new grade is equal to, I'm going to use a float because grades might not be round numbers. And then what am I going to do? I'm going to float the input. What am I going to input? I'm going to send a prompt to the user. Enter your next grade. And then a colon and a space. That is what I'm going to send to it. And then I'm going to close that single quote. And then I'm going to close that parenthesis, and then I'm going to close my other parentheses. You got to make sure you keep those parentheses balanced. A lot of the problems, a lot of the errors that you find in coding is from mismatched brackets or mismatched parentheses. So we're going to get the input from the user, we're going to float it, and we're going to put it in the variable new grade. Now where we really want it is we really want it in that array. So how do I get the number in the array? I'm going to say grade array dot append, and then what am I going to append? New grade. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now you can probably see that I could have probably done the float input inside the append, but then it starts getting not very readable. It says, you know, you would have like grade array dot append, which is kind of confusing anyway, of float, of input, of, and you kind of start getting confused. So I would rather do 2 steps, even though it might not be as efficient, just to make it more readable. Okay, so this should step through and it should get the grades from the user. Now we hit enter, and now I want to come out of that for loop because I've got the grades at this point. I think what I will do is I will print a blank line as such, just print a blank line, and now I'm going to print out the grades array. So if I'm going to print out the grades array, I want a nice title. I want to print the title 1 time, so I won't put it in the previous or the next for loop. And I will say a nice little greeting like your grades are, and then a colon, and then I will end that print in that string, and then I will end that parenthesis. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now what do I want to do? I want to print out those grades. What would I do? I would make another for loop for I in range. Where do I want to start? 0, because right, we put that first number in the 0th position of the array, so if we're going to print it, we better start printing from the 0th position of the array. Okay, so we're going to go from 0. How many times do we want to go? Num grades, And then how much do we want to increment the counter each time? By 1. For loop ends, a for loop is signified by the colon. Okay, now we need to tab over to stay inside of the for loop, and I'm going to say print. What am I going to print? Grade array. And then each time I'm going to print one number out of the array. So how do I tell it which number to print? Well, if I said 1 here, every time it would print the 1th grade. If I put a 0, every time it would print the 0th grade. Okay, that is the position in the index. So I don't want to keep printing the same number. I need something that changes. What changes? The index. So the index of the for loop, I'm going to put here I, not because it's I, but because it is the index of the for loop, and it is changing this time. And then I'm going to close that bracket, so it's saying print the ith term, the ith, the ith term of the array, and print it. Okay, so that should be pretty good, and that's really all we need to do in that for loop. Now you could do a lot of this all in the same for loop, but I like to have different for loops so it's real clear and crisp what you're doing. A lot of people program for efficiency. I program for ease of reading the code, because I've seen so many horrible nightmares because people were trying to code efficiently. They made their code unreadable, and then there were problems in there that caused great harm later on. And so other people that are programmers are going to argue with me, but I was an engineer that had to have programs work for me, and efficient coding often caused way more problems than it was worth. Just a little rant that I will go on. Okay, so we printed out, let's see, we printed out our array. That should be good. Okay, so now what do we want to do? We got the number of grades, we inputted the grades, we printed the grades. What do we want to do now? We need to get the average. Okay, how do you average numbers? You add them all up and then you divide by the number that you have. Well, what is the number that we have? Num grades. So when we get the total, we then want to divide the total by num grades. How do we get the total of all of the grades? Well, we need another for loop. We're going to step through that array again, but we're going to throw the numbers in a variable. I'm going to call it a bucket. So I'm going to go get the numbers and I'm going to throw them in the bucket. Well, if I'm going to start with a bucket, I better start with an empty bucket. So I'm going to say bucket equals 0. What am I doing? I'm emptying my bucket. Now I need to step through the array and put the numbers in the bucket. So I'm going to say for I in range. Where am I going to start? 0. How many times? Num grades. What's my increment? 1. Okay. Colon to start the for loop. Now tab to stay in the for loop. What am I going to do? Well, if I just say bucket is equal to grade array of I, what is wrong with that? If my first grade was 97, it's going to put 97 in the bucket, and if my second grade is 54, it's going to put 54 in the bucket. But the bucket's only going to have the last grade. I don't want the last grade, I want the sum of the grades. So how would I do that? Did you guys figure it out? It's so simple, but this is so hard for people to figure out on their own. Were you able to figure this out on your own? Bucket is equal to bucket plus grades of I. So you start by putting, bucket starts empty 0, so you have 0 plus the first grade. Then the next time through it's the first grade plus the second grade. Then the next time through it's the first plus. See, you're just adding that new grade into your bucket, and your bucket is keeping track of the sum. If you don't understand it, stop and think about it. Pause it and think about it, because you really need to understand that. It's a pretty important concept. Okay. So now I'm going to drop out of that for loop, and what do I need to do now? I've got the sum of the grades. Well, what do I need to do? I need to say that my average is equal to bucket divided by what? How many grades there were. How many grades were there? Num grades, like that. I hope I'm not making a lot of mistakes here. Okay, now I can print it out. So I can say print. I'm going to print a blank line just to kind of make it look good. So I'm going to just do a quote, 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 single quote, single quote. And now I'm going to say print. And then I'm going to say your average is, and then I'm gonna just start using single quotes because I think that's a good way of doing it. Instead of double quotes, use the single quote. And now a comma, and what do I want to print after this? I want to print the average, the variable. All right. So I print the string, your average is, and then I print the variable average. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I printed out the average. I think I'll print out another blank line. Single quote, close. Okay, what do I need to do now? I've got to figure out what the high grade is and the low grade is. Well, in order to do that, I need what? Two new variables. What are those variables going to be? High grade and low grade. All right, now normally you don't have to declare variables, but if I want to go out and find the high grade, I better start by setting high grade to something that anything would be higher than it is. So I'll start it at 0. So I want to start high grade at a really low number, right? So now if I put in a 3, 3 is going to be the new high grade, okay, because high grade started at 0, and that's as low as you could get. Similarly, what do you want to set low grade to? It's kind of the opposite. You want to set low grade to 100. All right, so you're initializing it. And you know what people do? They set high grade to 100 and low grade to 0, and then you never find something that changes that. So you got to, again, you got to kind of think through this a little bit. Now, what do I got to do? I got to run through that array again. How do I do that? For I in range. Where do I start? 0. How many times do I go? Num grades. Okay, and then what's my increment? 1. Okay, and a for loop is going to have a colon at the end of it. I tabs to stay in it. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to compare each grade to high grade. I'm going to compare each grade to low grade. And if the new grade, the grade in the array is greater than high grade, then I'm going to have a new high grade. If it's lower than low grade, I'm going to have a new low grade. I would use what for that? If statements. So what I am going to say is, I am going to say if grade array of what? Of I, that's my index. If it is less than low grade, then if statement, again, like the for loop, has a colon. And then I need to tab under. So this is nested. This if statement is nested inside the for. So I have to tab twice because I've got to be indented under the if statement. And I've told you I really don't like this indentation scheme to keep track of the clauses, but that's the way Python does it. So if grade array, ooh, this was a terrible mistake. I said 1 and not I, and that's a very hard one to find. If grade array of I, you know, as I'm stepping through that grade array, if it is less than low grade, what does that mean? I have a new low grade. So then low grade would be equal to grade array of I. And I just saw another error, and you guys have probably seen 50 other ones. Grade array of I. So if grade array of I, this grade that I'm looking at in the list, if it's lower than low grade, then I've got a new low grade. So then low grade would be grade array of I. Similarly, what I would want to do is if grade array of I is greater than grade or of high grade, then I've got a new winner, right? I've got a new high grade. So then I would need to make high grade equal to grade array of I. Does that make sense? So you just step through the list and you grab whatever the highest grade is, and then the winner will win at the end of the winner will win at the end of the for loop. Okay, what do I do now? I'm going to print, and then I'm going to say your high grade is space, close it out, comma, and then high grade. And I'm going to print your low grade is colon space and then comma low grade. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, how many horrible mistakes did I do in there? I see another one that I made. Again, I'm missing the Y on my array several times. We will blame the wireless keyboard on that. How about that? Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, how do we save this? We do it with a Control-O to overwrite, hit Enter, and then a Control-X. And I'm afraid to even compile this thing, but we're going to have to. We're using Python 3, remember Python 3, and avgrades.py, and let's see what happens. Look at that! At least I got to the first question. Let's say that I have 6 grades, okay? I have 96, I have 91, I have 55, I've got 75, and I have 43. No, I would never make a 43. Let's say a 99, okay? Ooh, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's right, okay, and then I'll say a 92. All right, boom, look at that. Your grades are 96, 91, 55, 75, 99, and 92. So that is the list of grades as I input them. Your average is 84.6667, and then your high grade is 99, and your low grade is 55. Boom, we got that, okay? I think the one thing that I would do here, if I can, and I do not have this memorized, but what I think I would do is, let's see, where is that? Now I'm really hoping, okay, you see, what is the one thing that doesn't look good here, that 84.666667, so let's format that, and so we'll go back in Nano, and we will nano avgrades.py, okay, and then what we will do is we will come down here and we will look at where that print was of the average. Okay, and then remember we did this last week, and so if you don't remember it, go back and look at it. But what we're going to do is we're going to put an open quote, an open curly, and then we're going to put a colon, and then we're going to say dot 2f. So that means I just want 2 to the right of the decimal point, and then I'm going to say dot format, and then what am I going to print? Average. And then I got to put another closing parenthesis there to keep things balanced. And I'm missing my close of the curly. And the close of the curly comes after the 2f. All right, so I've got the kind of open curly bracket, colon dot 2f, that's telling it the format to put 2 spots to the right of the decimal point, and then close the quote, which I also didn't do. Okay, close the quote. So that quote to quote is encoding the formatting, and then dot, apply it to what? Dot format, and then average. So let's see if this will work. So we'll do a Control-O, and then Enter, Control-X, and then let's go again. We're going to say Nano, we're going to say Python 3, average grades. And I have got a crazy phone call coming in here. Let me see if I can turn this off. Sorry. Okay, how many grades do you have? I have 4 grades. Okay. Enter your next grade. Well, let's say I have a 98, a 76, 99, a 79, Okay, look at that. Your grades are 98, 76, 99, 79. Your average is 88.00. Boom, nicely formatted. Your high grade was 99 and your low grade is 76. Great. That is really, really pretty slick. Okay, guys, I think at this point, you know what, I'm really tempted? I'm going to give you a homework assignment, but then I'm not going to do another lesson on that homework assignment because we need to move on. But what your homework assignment is to now go out and create a sorted list of the grades. Okay, go out and create a sorted list. So I showed you how to do high, showed you how to do low, showed you how to do average. Now see if you can sort the list. All right, so just play around with that on your own. And then what we're going to do next week is I think that we're going to start trying to get towards the artificial intelligence. And so there's a couple of things that we're going to need to do, and we're going to install a package called Opencv, and Opencv will be the package that we will be using to start doing the artificial intelligence. And then the lesson after that, we've got to install a library called Matplotlib, and then we've got to kind of get comfortable with Matplotlib, because man, if you guys don't learn a little bit, also there's NumPy I will put in there. If you don't learn a little bit about NumPy, if you don't learn a little bit about Matplotlib, those libraries, you're just going to be copying and pasting me. So you're not going to learn artificial intelligence unless you kind of become familiar with these packages. I feel like we have done a good job getting comfortable with Python. I feel like we've done a good job getting comfortable with Linux. Expect the next lesson to be installing Matplotlib. Then expect the next lesson to be after that to be installing Opencv. Then what we're going to do is we're going to need a better development environment. I'm glad we've used Nano because we can kind of bang it out on a text editor, old school. Okay, but as we start doing Opencv and start doing artificial intelligence, we need a neater, cleaner, more helpful programming environment than a text editor. So I'll show you how to install that, and then we will start actually doing the artificial intelligence. And I'm getting a certain amount of hate from you guys wanting me to go faster, but the title says right there, the title says artificial intelligence for the absolute beginner. So we don't want to leave anyone behind. We want you to become familiar with what we're doing, and we will get to the good stuff, believe me, because I'm already like really working ahead on some stuff, and I have got some really, really cool things that that I've done. I don't even know if I can do this. Let's see. Give me just a second here. I might give you a quick demo. Maybe, maybe not. I hope I can show you just a quick demo of kind of where I'm going with this. I don't think I can because I didn't run it from here, but basically I've got the image recognition, and I've got the pattern recognition, and I've got tracking things. I've got stuff, and all this I'm doing from scratch. You know, I'm not going out and just running people's demo programs. So I hope that you'll be patient. I hope you will learn this stuff, and I promise you we are getting to the good stuff. Hey, if you like this lesson, give me a thumbs up. Would really appreciate it. Also, think about subscribing to the channel, and share this lesson with other people if you like it. I really like, as I've been watching some of the later videos that I'm been releasing, you guys are starting to interact a little bit as a community. You're posting your code, you're commenting on other people's codes, you're sort of kind of going back and forth and interacting with each other. That's a great encouragement to me. And again, really want to give a shout out to my Patreons. That gives me the encouragement to keep making these lessons. If you're not a supporter, think about hopping over there and giving me a little help. Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.